Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night Big Book study group. My name is Janet. I've recovered from compulsive eating and bulimia. So just a quick word on the history of our Zoom meetings Monday and Thursday. We started a Monday night meeting because I had a few sponsees, Karen, who's here, being one of them, who were all on the same level. And so I wanted to just go through the book with them. So I took them through the steps one at a time. But the book, I said, why don't we all just get on a Zoom meeting and I can kind of share the things I've learned about the book through the years. So we did that, we opened it up, and then we just started getting a regular thing going on Monday nights. So for anyone who's interested, we meet Monday nights at this same Zoom line at 8 p.m. And that's always a big book study. So we go through one chapter or sometimes at half a chapter at a time. And it's more like a workshop format where I talk and then there's questions. And so next week at 8 p.m. we will be on Bill's story. I've been doing this a few months, and then when live meetings got shut down, started another one on Thursday, which Melissa and I alternate just sharing and either having a testimony or a discussion, just kind of a varied format. And then a couple of my sponsees said, Janet, we never heard your testimony. So tonight, I will just share my story. Hopefully it will, as Beverly says, I will be sharing experience, strength, and hope. But my bigger hope is, as the big book talks about on page 29, it talks about the reason for the personal stories, and it's so that each individual describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. Because for me, that's a solution. So I'm just going to share my story and hope it helps. This is being recorded. A couple people asked for it to be recorded, but then at the end, where we just take numbers of anyone who's new, then we'll pause the record, then we'll stop the recording so that everyone's phone number isn't recorded. Okay, so as I said, I'm Janet. I've recovered from compulsive eating and bulimia. I will tell you a little bit about my history. We all have pretty much the same history. So just like all of us, I stole food. I stole money for food. When I was in high school, my school was across the street from the mall. I would leave school and walk across the street to the mall and buy these like big chocolate chip cookies and eat them. And the mall and not the mall for the clothes, the mall with the store that had the chocolate chip cookies was more important than my schoolwork. Food just was the highlight of everything. And I was thinking, how far back can I remember it? And I'm not kidding you. I remember in nursery school looking forward to the little Tam Tam crackers that were the snack every day. Like that was the highlight. When I was on the brownie camping trip, it was the little puddings. That was the highlight of the camping trip. My whole life, like the highlight of everything was food. And I'm sure I did some of the same crazy things that we all did. I would eat frozen cakes, and there were no microwaves, so didn't defrost them, just ate frozen cakes. I stole other people's food. When I was in college, I would steal my roommate's food, go out to get a replacement. Before I could even get the food back, I would eat the replacement. Let's see, I remember then I had an apartment in New York City and walking out at 2 in the morning to find an open place where I can get food and not having money except my rent money. So of course, that's what rent money went for. It went to feeding my my binge habit. One time I was staying with a friend and we were being hosted by another family over a college weekend, and everyone was taking a nap on an afternoon, and my friend and I ate a whole cake that was in the fridge, and the hostess came out a little later and she said, God, I could have sworn I made a cake. And we just, yeah, okay, we just pretended like whatever, we didn't know. Um, and I was miserable. I could go on and on about food stuff, but I think it's also important to know about kind of my life stuff because, yeah, I couldn't stop eating, but there were other behaviors I couldn't stop either. I was an incredibly selfish person, and often teenagers and young adults are selfish, but I took it to new heights or new depths. I can recall in college, I made up this thing. There were like two types of boys to date, a GC or an MT. A GC was a good catch, and an MT was a meal ticket. It was like people were just disposable commodities to me. I couldn't stand being alone. So I would go to crazy lengths to make sure that I had companionship, usually male companionship. And it would sometimes involve things like taking a razor blade and slashing myself up and saying that I'd been mugged to get attention. And one time I had a boyfriend and I didn't care that he was in school and what he was going through. I just wanted more attention. So I did my usual, took a razor, slashed myself, and called him and told him I was raped. So then, of course, he had to come get me, took me to the hospital, took me to, I went and got a rape exam, and then, faked my way through a whole rape exam, and then afterwards told him that I was pregnant and I didn't know if the baby was his or the rapist, and I took money from him to have an abortion when I wasn't pregnant. I just took the money. Um, So I guess in psychological terms, you could just say that I was a hot mess. Now, during all this time, I actually went to my first OA meeting when I was 16 years old. So all this stuff, a lot of this stuff was happening while I was in OA. I went to OA, started when I was 16, and I got recovered when I was 23. So I spent 6, 7 years still binging. And during that time, here's what I did. I did everything that I was told to do. I was not one of those people who was crazy defiant. And as I said before, I think people don't recover for one of two reasons. Either they're not willing to do what they're told, they're not willing, or they're told the wrong thing. So if I had diabetes and I was told the solution was penicillin, and I took the penicillin, I would not get one bit better. So I was told to get abstinent, and the way it was done back then was you would do 30 assignments and then get a plant. Well, I never got that friggin' plant. I couldn't get 30 days together in that 6 or 7 years. I couldn't do it. And I guess I would wonder, like, how can you guys tell me I'm powerless, but then tell me to have power to stick to a food plan? And, I guess a common answer was like, oh, Janet, you're just defiant and you're just this. But the real answer is it is impossible. It's impossible to be powerless and then have power. And so the problem was that I wasn't told how to have power because that was the solution. But I'll get to that. So I did my assignments. I wrote out my food. I called my sponsor when I was supposed to. I wrote that friggin' assignment, write your history of compulsive eating from as far back as you can remember, probably 40 times, because in those 6 or 7 years I had, and I'm not exaggerating, about 50 different sponsors because I desperately wanted to get better. I desperately wanted to get better. But in fact, I got worse. When I first started OA, I was binging and purging twice a week. At the end of 6 or 7 years, I was binging and purging up to 6 times a day. Even years after I stopped, I had done so much damage, I had to have major surgery on my esophagus because it had just become so loose. And so this was in OA. I kept getting worse. So people said, just keep coming, it'll get better. Well, I kept coming and it didn't get better. It got worse. And they said, just have hope. Well, so imagine being in a group of people like Cancer Patients Anonymous and someone saying, you're in a meeting, you're with other cancer patients, you'll get better, just have hope. That's criminal, because you have to tell them to, I don't know, chemo or radiation or whatever the treatment is. Being with a group of other compulsive eaters, it made me feel a little better that I wasn't the only one on the planet. So, that felt better. I didn't feel so lonely. Sometimes, only when I was at meetings, but I didn't get better. Why was I binging? Well, I used to think, and as a lot of people say, like, well, I binge because I'm miserable. I binge because, and there's always a because. And it was generally like, I binge because I'm miserable. And I remember saying that. And I was 17, so I'd been in OA for a year. And this college boy invited me to a Beach Boys concert. Well, when you're 17, there is nothing better than that. And I went out and binged. And I thought, I must be binging to sabotage my happiness. And I learned that both were wrong. I didn't binge because I was miserable. I didn't binge to sabotage my happiness. I binged because I had an illness that I couldn't control. I had an illness that was stronger than I was. And I wanted to stop, but as it says on page 24, at a certain point in the drinking, eating of every alcoholic, compulsive eater, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking or binging is of absolutely no avail. So all those people who said to me, oh, you don't really want to stop. You imagine going up to someone who has cancer and saying, you must not really want your cancer cells to stop multiplying, because if you did, you could make them stop multiplying. But that's what I experienced. And I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. Because I had an illness. And so the way this illness works is just described beautifully on page 24. I was without defense. And the defense that the big book talks about is a mental defense. And they actually go further than that. They say there's a problem with my memory. And that's what I had. So along with a food problem, I had and still have a cat allergy problem. So here's the way it works with my cat allergy problem. If I go near a cat, like I'll sneeze and wheeze and may end up having to go to urgent care. So that's happened a number of times. So stored in my memory banks was the knowledge that if I go near a cat, I can't breathe. So here's my memory, and then here's my conscious will. So normally, if I want to do something, so let's say my kids would say, Mom, can you take us to the pet store? And I wanted to make my kids happy. And so I have a desire to do something, but there's something in my memory that said, wait, remember cat attack? Cat allergy gives you an asthma attack, you can't do it. And my memory would generate a thought that would run across the bridge and hit my conscious mind. The book also talks about, so my protection against a cat-induced asthma attack is my memory. The book also talks about a hot stove. So normally, if I'm about to touch a hot stove, let's say I'm cleaning, but I've just made dinner, so the stove is hot. In my memory banks, either because I've touched a hot stove in the past and gotten burned, or I've been taught a hot stove will burn me, my memory will send a little thought across the bridge that will tell me, don't touch the hot stove. So my defense, our defense against doing something dangerous is our memory, right? That's why we don't let our little kids play near hot stoves or go outside, because it isn't in their memories yet that a hot stove can burn you, that if you cross the street, a truck can come and hit you. They have no memory. But I had a memory. When it came to cats, I have not had a cat-induced asthma attack in years. I have not touched a hot stove in long time. So with food, there was in my memory banks was the memory of horrible binging. The best example I can think of is when I was in college, there was a certain brand of cookie. It came in a box of 20 that I would go binge on. And actually, no, that's not true. I wouldn't go to binge on it. I would end up binging on it. I would say, I'm only going to have one or two of them. And then I would inevitably end up eating all 20 and sometimes going back for a second box. So that's in my memory banks. So I'm about to go out and get those cookies again. And so my memory does what it's supposed to do. It generates a thought that says, no, you think you're going to eat one, but you're going to end up eating 20. And it goes to send the thought across the bridge, but the bridge is broken. And that thought cannot get from my memory to my conscious mind and my will. So when people say, there's a slogan that I've heard people say sometimes, keep the memory green, that is not in the big book. And it is actually opposite of what the big book teaches us. The big book teaches us that we cannot keep the memory green because the memory is broken. The exact wording in the book is, we are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of a week or a month ago. So the memories are there, they just can't get into my conscious mind. And then it says, we are without defense against the first drink or the first compulsive bite. No defense. So I knew I was powerless. I knew I was hopeless. Here I was in OA for 6 years, doing what I was told, trying my best, crying, pleading, writing on pieces of paper. Abstinence from compulsive eating is the most important thing in my life without exception. I would write it over and over, and I was not getting better. I was doomed because this is a fatal, hopeless illness. Fatal, meaning it wants us dead. And there I was, hopeless, with no defense, defeated. And then God launched a search and rescue program for me. That's the only way I can put it. God just started a search and rescue mission to get me. And I think if in reading through the stories, that's a common thread through most of them. I'm not recovered because I did a bunch of work. I'm recovered because God launched a search and rescue program for me. So I was at an OA convention, eating compulsively at an OA convention, feeling hopeless. And at first someone said, I found the solution. And the room got deadly quiet. You could hear a pin drop. And the person said, next time you want to eat, just don't eat. And everyone stood up, and everyone's clapping. And I'm thinking, what the F? If I could not eat, like that whole thing, don't eat and go to meetings. If I could don't eat and go to meetings, I don't eat and go to the movies. Just don't eat. That made no sense to me. And I just felt hopeless. I was sitting there feeling hopeless. So I walk into another workshop, and there's this woman, and she had this like beautiful blonde curly hair. It almost looked like a halo. And she held up a big book like this, and she said she hadn't binged in a year. In a year, remember, in like 6 or 7 years, I couldn't get 2 weeks to, I think my record, I once got 14 days. I couldn't do it. A year? That was like eternity. And I wouldn't go up to her because like if you see an angel, you don't walk up to them because it's scary. But I thought the girl next to me knew her. So I said, do you know her? And she said, yes, she's my sister. So I said, can you introduce me? So she did. I went up to her and I just said, can you help me? And she said, can you read the first 164 pages of the book? And I said, okay. So that night, I skipped the talent show and I just went in my room and I read the book because I was hopeless, but now I had a glimmer of hope because there's someone who had been like me, but now she wasn't. Now she wasn't binging. So the next day I went to her and she said, okay, are you willing to do everything in this book? And I said, well, there's this one amend I'm not willing to make. And she said, are you willing to trust that by the time you get to step 8, you'll be a different person? And I said, okay. And so after a few false starts, I started working the steps. I was at a meeting and she told me there were a whole bunch of people like her who weren't binging, who hadn't binged in long periods of time. And that meeting was an hour and a half for me. But on Friday nights, I got my butt to that meeting because I wanted what they had. And so after a while, I had a few false starts. I maybe got a month or two, but it didn't really click. And one time, I was up at a friend's house who lived near there, and I remember this. I was stuffing bagel chips down my throat in the bathroom before the meeting was about to start. And then I went to the meeting, and there was someone there who was recovered, and I asked him to be my sponsor. And I was terrified of this person because I knew I would not be able to game this person, that I couldn't, be all cute or too cute or too smart or too anything. I knew okay, if I took this sponsor, this means business. So P.S. This sponsor later told me that they got an intuitive thought at the time, make it difficult for her, because you value the most what you have to work hardest for. I wasn't told that at the time, but it wouldn't have mattered. And that was my last binge. So now, why? Well, I was thinking about it, and I think the first thing was honesty, open-minded, and willingness. So this sponsor said to me, you need to be honest, and the first sign of dishonesty, I will drop you. And so I made a decision to be honest. And I was a liar. It's like you would say, oh, is it raining out? And it would be raining. And I would say, no, the sun is shining. I mean, I was a crazy liar. And I just said, okay, I'll be honest. And I remember it was about a week later, this person lived an hour and a half from me, and I had to get a sponsor right near me, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I told a lie to my food sponsor, and right afterwards, shortly afterwards, I fixed it. But I remember then having to call my sponsor, sitting there terrified that I would say I lied and I would get dropped. But I think I was more terrified of this not working. I was, it was, and again, in Two Employers, it talks about that if a man is drunk and is still trying to recover, he will tell you about it, even if it means the loss of his job, for he knows he must be honest if he would live at all. That's on page 146. So I knew I had to be honest. So I remember calling my sponsor and saying, I told a lie. I told a lie to my food sponsor. And I was asked, did you correct it? And it's like, yes. And it's like, okay. And I didn't get dropped. So I guess my sponsor knew my heart at that point, that I really was willing to do anything. So this is why I had to get a food sponsor who lived near me. So you know how, well, now people text their food. Sometimes back then people would call in their food. Yeah, not me. So I was told I had to get all the food out of my house, and I could only buy enough of what was needed for the next day. And I didn't get to call in my food. My sponsor actually picked my food sponsor based on her proximity to me. She lived about 10 blocks from me. And every day before I went to work, I had to go to my food sponsor's house and show her my food for the day. So it would be, here's my breakfast, here's my lunch, here's my dinner, here's my snacks. That's what I had to do. Then from her house, it was 3 subways and a walk to my job down on the Lower East Side. And my job at the time, I was doing this I was working with home attendants, and so I had to visit clients. And a lot of, if any of you know New York City, my clients were in Washington Heights, which is on the all the way on the Upper West Side. So I would walk around from my house to my food sponsors, to the Lower East Side, to the Upper West Side, carrying my food for the day in a backpack with a can opener, with whatever I needed. And it never occurred to me to say, are you effing kidding me? All I was grateful. Because as I was doing this, I was able to stay abstinent. I was just like, okay, I'm abstinent. So I was willing. The other thing that happened that night when I got that sponsor is I said a prayer. And I'd said prayers before, and I'd always believed in God, but I thought God was there for like war and poverty and children starving in Ethiopia, and what did he care about me and my food? But this time, I said, God, I've always had fixed ideas of what you were like and how to worship you. I'm willing to admit it's all wrong and to start over and to let you show me what you're like and how to worship you. And I didn't know it at the time, but that was really my second step and my third step, because I knew I was powerless. I'd known that for a long time, but again, a first step alone doesn't give us power. I just said, God, you're my only hope. And then basically, I'll do whatever you say. God, I'll worship you however you want. I'll do whatever you want. So it was really like my first 3 steps right there. And then I started doing things on my own. Now, my sponsor didn't tell me this, but I just decided if God was my hope and I was going to have a relationship with God, I needed to start spending quality time with God. So I just made a decision that I was going to spend at least 45 minutes every morning with God. And the way I broke it down is 15 minutes of spiritual reading, 15 minutes of prayer, and 15 minutes of meditation. And meditation was just listening to see if God had anything to say to me. Now, he might not, but I was going to give him the opportunity where I was going to do nothing except listen. And I've pretty much carried that on to this day, the same protocol. Sometimes it's more time. I like when I can do more time. I shoot for an hour. Sometimes it's a little less, but that's kind of my protocol every day: spiritual reading, prayer, and meditation. So I set up quiet time. I knew I had to be selfish. Now here I was like new in recovery. So I would do things like make sandwiches for homeless people in New York, on the New York City streets, because I did what I knew. So I was honest. I made a commitment to go to any lengths. I started a relationship with God, and I did what I knew. I knew I had to be unselfish, so I started being unselfish in the way that I knew. Then I did my 4th step, which is where I inventoried my resentments and really looked at my part. I inventoried my fears, my defects, my past relationships. When I did a 5th step, the best way I could describe it, it was like trees looked greener. It's like I got a new pair of glasses. I was blind, but now I see. I experienced that. And all this time, I wasn't even really thinking about it. It was just like the days were going by, and I wasn't eating compulsively. There were no plans, there were no ceremonies, although a few years later, when I told that story about not getting a plant, some of my friends in OA gave me a plant. But it was just kind of the time was passing, and I was doing what I was told and just not eating compulsively. In the 6th and 7th step, I asked for my defects to be removed. I went back and made amends. One of the amends I made was to that guy who I had told him I'd been raped and then taken money from, saying I needed an abortion. Not sure if it was his. I gave him the money back. I confessed the whole thing. I wrote a letter to the hospital where I'd had the rape exam and confessed what I had done, and then sent them some money to be used in a program to, I don't remember, help rape victims or something along those lines. So I did what I could to clean things up. And so that was my 1 through 9. 10 was really, I have here. just looking to continue to clean things up as they come up. 11th step, I really, what I did for my 11th step is I said, I want the kind of recovery that the founders of this program had. They had spiritual experiences. The way they talk about it, and this is again a beautiful line and a beautiful explanation. It says they had envisioned the great reality, capital G, capital R. Like, I wanted that. I wanted that rearrangement where page 25, the great fact is justice and nothing less. We've had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, towards our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives is the absolute certainty our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous, or miracle. So I wanted what they had. So I wanted to study what they studied. So I just looked up the books and that the pioneers of AA studied, and I just started reading those books. And then step 12, to practice these principles in all our affairs, to continue to be honest, unselfish, helpful in everything, everything that I do. Before, when I was binging, I remember getting fired from like being a secretary. I couldn't hold a job. I went back to school. I got an MBA. I got a law degree. I now have a job that I love. My boss values me, and I work with colleagues who are wonderful. Instead of being crazy in relationships, I have a stable marriage. In fact, I think my husband is, let me see if he's on. Yeah, my husband is on now. So I have a good marriage. I have 2 teenagers, and I can most of the time meet the challenges in a healthy way. But most of all, I have a great sense of purpose. And even in these troubling times of the virus and everything, I don't have a lot of fear, because I know, as I've heard it said, I may not know what the future holds, but I know who holds my future. And even some of you may know, it was exactly a week ago tonight, my husband had a heart attack, and as they were loading him into the ambulance, and because of the coronavirus, I couldn't go with him, and I was kissing him goodbye and told him I loved him. And I remember thinking, like, this may be the last time I see my husband alive. And I have to say, I don't say I was okay. I was okay. I was calm, and I just said to myself, no matter what happens, God is good. And we had a miraculous happening. I mean, it was miraculous. With 100% blockage of an artery, he was home the next day with no heart muscle damage. So but even if that hadn't been the outcome, I am still able to say God is good. And I would not have, I believe with the grace of God, I would not have eaten over it, because the times I ate in the past, I always used to say, well, it's because of this or because of that, a circumstance. It was never because of a circumstance. 100% of the time, it was because of my spiritual condition, which was lousy. Always, that's the cause. So I talked before about the broken bridge, how that was a problem. There's a broken bridge, so my memory couldn't defend me because couldn't get across the bridge. What I had to do was go across another bridge. That's really the solution. I would say, I like the meeting title. The Monday night meeting is called "There is a Solution." I love that for so many reasons. First, the hope in it. There's a solution. There is a solution, not there's 49 optional solutions. There may be outside of this program, but this program has one solution, and his name is God. So I needed to cross the bridge to God. The first way to get over that bridge for me was faith. Maybe there's a God who's willing to help. And in the book, it says that's when we start getting power. Page 46, it talks about that's when we get our first infusion of power. When we say maybe there's a God who can help. And then taking further steps over that bridge by submission, to do God's will as best I can. Steps 4 through 9 are about cleaning up the landmines in the bridge, getting rid of my debris that keeps me from going all the way across the bridge, getting rid of my resentments, my fears, my harms, my selfishness. Step 10 is getting rid of the debris or the landmines of the day. And step 11 is where we pray and meditate for knowledge of God's will for us and power to carry it out, because sometimes God does actually speak. A lot of times I get nothing, but there are times when thoughts come to me that were not my thoughts. And I test them out. I don't assume, if I get a thought like, Janet, it's okay to buy that $500 pocketbook, that, oh, God said okay. No. Generally when it's someone to help, or maybe go to a meeting that I hadn't been planning on going to, or a solution to a problem I'd been trying to work out, or seeing my part in something. And here's actually a quick example from yesterday. A friend had asked me to make a couple of deliveries to people who were in need. So she asked if I could make 2. So I said, that's fine. And I got there and she said, oh, can you do 3? I'm like, no, as long as you're covered and someone else can, no, it's okay. Just 2, because I've got work. And that came up on my nightly review, oh, that wasn't really good. And this morning when I started my meditation, a line, and what often happens to me is I get a line out of the big book or out of the Bible. A line out of the Bible came to me that if someone asks you to go a mile with them, go with them 2. And so I thought, not only should I have said, yes, I'll take 3 baskets to deliver, I should have offered to do 4, because she had asked me to do 2. But that wasn't from me. That was me being willing to give God some time. And then it was like, now here's what you, so then it's like, okay, God, I'm sorry, forgive me. I discussed it with someone and I trust that he'll present me with another opportunity, and hopefully next time I'll do better. So step 11, we pray and meditate to know what God's will is for us. And then step 12 is really where we help other people build their bridges. Ultimately, this program is about miracles. So I'm just going to end with something on page 57, where it talks, anyone who's familiar with the big book knows about the minister's son. And he was a hardcore alcoholic. He was in the hospital, and then he had a spiritual experience, and the obsession to drink left and never came back. And they say, what is this but a miracle of healing? So that word miracle, yet its elements are simple. That to me is such a mind-boggling line. They're telling me the elements of a miracle are simple. What? That's like, here's your recipe for a miracle. Circumstances made him willing to believe, became willing. He humbly offered himself to his maker. Step 3, then he knew. And then they say, even so has God restored us all 100% to our right minds. Now, look how it says it, our right minds. But again, it's later in the book in chapter 5, once the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. The miracle started in my soul. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly, but he has come to all who have honestly sought him. I think that's the one of the secrets for having a miracle is God doesn't make too hard terms with those who seek him, but we have to seek him. I do all I can, but all I can isn't nearly enough. All I can do is place myself in a position so that a miracle can take place. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. And that is my experience, and I hope Beverly was chiding me before the meeting to make sure that it gave hope. So I hope that it did, and thank you all for being here. At this point, we have about 20-ish minutes left. Thank you. Oh, how cute. All you people doing the like Zoom emojis. That's so cute. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. And then at the last like 5 minutes, anyone who's new can give their name, and Adina can will tell you about our little group where that you can be added to, and all that. So now, do I need to unmute? I think you can allow participants on. Anyone, if you want to unmute yourself, and if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
I was going to ask you about the sponsors. When you said you had about 60 and they dropped, did they drop you, or did some of them you drop?
It was like 50. Gosh, I can't even remember how many now. Oh, by the way, it's been over 30 years now that I've been in recovery. So it's been longer than some of you have been alive. But this program really works. And the book talks over and over about permanent recovery. And it really can be permanent as long as we keep doing the stuff that keeps us in the light of the miracle. So Beverly, I think some dropped me and some I dropped. I don't remember how many of each.
I got a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I got 2 questions. How did you come to believe? And how did you turn over your will every day?
So coming to believe was, again, as I said, I said a prayer. And I had always thought I was like a religious person. And then one day someone said to me, well, if you have such a great relationship with God, why are you still binging? And I couldn't answer that. And so my prayer, remember, was I said, God, I'm willing to admit everything I think I know about you is wrong, and let you show me what you're like and how you want me to worship you. And then it just grew from there. I studied, I read a lot about God. I read what the founders of AA read. And then your second question was, oh, so it's, again, we do what we know. So there's 2 ways to God's will. One, we pray and meditate, right? Like I give him the time to let me know his will. And there's certain things we just know. I mean, we know we have to be honest. We know we can't shoplift. We know we can't lie. And sometimes that's why we have sponsors, because at the beginning, sometimes it's hard to know. So, we can ask our sponsors for guidance. Not that they're God, but at the beginning, my brain didn't work. So I needed someone to just give me guidance on like basic stuff. Okay, thanks.
Hey, Janet, I have a question. It's Sam.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much for your share. I took so many notes. I am just wondering if you can just share a little bit more about your like your 45 minutes, 15, 15, 15. I totally get the being quiet, listening for God. Just wondering, like, how do you pray for 15 minutes? I mean, I pray in the morning, but it's definitely not 15 minutes.
So I would actually say there are a lot of 15 minutes after you get and start doing it, it's really not that long. And I just find, I didn't get to everything. So, but a basic grid, if you want a grid to just start with, is to start with praise, or actually starting with, start with praise. So what I usually do is I have a song or two. So it might be reading a psalm to God or singing a spiritual song. I say it right to him. And then if I have anything that I've done wrong that I need to kind of repent of, confess, repent, ask his forgiveness of, and then thank him. So at one point, I don't do this every day now, I would just make a list of 10 things I was grateful for, and not just write them down on a piece of paper, because remember, I want a relationship. So I would say, God, thank you. Thank you that my husband came through the heart attack okay. Thank you that my relationship with my daughter is beyond anything I could have dreamed. Thank you that I'm abstinent. Thank you that I have my job. Thank you that we have heat. So thank you. And then prayers for things that I need help with, prayers for God's grace to help me with things, and prayers for other people. So that definitely can fill 15 minutes. Okay.
Thank you.
So that's like a good, grid to start with. Ultimately, it's a relationship, and relationships don't have formulas. But to get a discipline, that's probably a good way to start. Is there any other questions?
Janet, this is Catherine. I have a question.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm struggling with for myself and people around me is trying to explain and also believe for myself about this being a priority above all else, above of anything I'm doing, and not making excuses that I have to, go to work or be somewhere that, for a family member, or make sure I'm eating at the right time, or I guess that wouldn't really count, but I'm wondering if you have any guidance for in moments that you might have thought that or felt that, and how you got past that for yourself and with other people around you.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. So I'm trying to work on assignments right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be a day where I'm at work for 12 hours and I want to take the time to stop and work on things and have my time in the morning and have my time in the evening. And I kind of feel like the answer is just, if it matters to me, you take the time. But I don't know how to be able to prioritize it while I still take responsibility for making a living for myself and keeping my apartment clean and making sure that I'm preparing all of my meals. And I don't know if that makes sense.
So I would say, so yes, we have to make it a priority. So the big book says two things on that. For one, it says that this has to be a priority because without recovery, there is no job, there is no family. However, it also talks about the man who's, it's in the family afterwards, but about how sometimes people go so far to the extreme. A spiritual life which does not include his family obligations may not be so perfect after all. So I think it's easy to fall off on either side of the bed, not making enough time for it, or being so consumed with it. It's like, if I on a regular basis didn't make dinner for my family because I was talking to sponsees, that would not, in my opinion, be recovery. So I think this is one of the times where it's really helpful to have a sponsor to go over each individual situation.
I see what you're saying. Well, I'll talk to her and bring that up more then.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I think we have time for if there's one more question.
This is Dee. I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Okay. When you spoke earlier, you said that you needed to get 30 days, and I know you said that you read the first 164 pages in the big book, but maybe I missed how you got through with 30 days abstinence, or did I misunderstand and maybe you said 3 days, not 30?
Okay, so what I did say was that when I first started, the group I was with said you had, kind of, you got 30 days and then you got a plant, and I never did it. So no, when I started working these steps, no one talked about counting days. It was just, here's the work, do it. I did it, and the days just turned into weeks, into months, into years. But no, no, there was, no one made a requirement of me to like be absent for 30 days or 3 days before they would work with me. I just had to be willing to go to any length. Okay. Okay. So if there is nothing else,
Hi, Janet. I'm sorry, it's me again.
hi.
Hi. So I was just kind of like dovetailing off that question. So you were talking about right before when you were like eating the bagel chips and you had that hard sponsor. Was that hard sponsor ever telling you something about like, okay, you're not going to do this with food anymore? I mean, I know she was telling you to, you know.
No, here's the way it went. It went, okay, you have to be honest. You can't keep food in your house. You can't, you know, and I had a food plan, and that was it. No, I'm when I became willing to follow directions and work on my relationship with God, I became abstinent. So that was my experience of it.
Hi, Jack. Can I pop in
Yeah.
real quick?
Yeah.
Hi, a compulsive overeater and bulimic. Thank you so much for this. My question is, when you turn something over to God and give it over, how do you continually keep, like, when will pops up? How do you keep that with God and not?
I think first there has to be an uber commitment. Like, I am going to spend the rest of my life doing God's will. Now, so there's got to be that. It can't just be, okay, I'll do God's will here and there. Like, it's like when people get married, right? There's like it's a big deal, right? Now then, every day they have to carry out their, you know, responsibilities, and sometimes it's hard. And sometimes we mess up. So I'm not going to say every single time I do what I know to be God's will for me. That's not true. If it was, there wouldn't be a 10th step in the book. So a couple is one, just getting committed. And the more we do it, the more we see life works, and reminding ourselves, life didn't work when I was on self-will. In the book, it says we remind ourselves we constantly say to ourselves many times during the day, thy will, not mine, be done. Thy will, not mine, be done. And for me, it also helps me to have, if there's something that's particularly difficult, to have someone that I'm accountable to, that I can say, you know, I'm really struggling in this area. This is what I think I'm supposed to do. Like, for the next 7 days, can I call you every day and you can, you know, hold my feet to the fire?
Thank you so much. That was so helpful.
Okay. Yeah, Melissa?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a couple questions. One was, you know, you talked about sponsors who didn't necessarily give you the correct information, the correct, you know, how to have this miracle of healing. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, you know, there's like kind of two parts to that. One, do you think that that was an important part of your own journey, that you had misinformation and that sort of readied you for when the real information came? And the other one, I'm wondering, have you had an opportunity to maybe inform some of those people in a loving, balanced way about what you know, what they perhaps could have done to be more helpful for others?
So your second question, I have to say, I don't remember, because we're talking like 30 years. And I'm sure if the people were in my life, I would have. So I would have to assume the people that I would, but some, because I started in Florida and then I moved to New York. So, but I know there's people like went back and like, oh, I used to know, but I can't even remember that far back. And to say like, was it like God's will for me that I flounder around for 6.5 years before I heard it? I thought about that, and on the one hand, I say I had a big book, and like, but no one ever told me to read it. That this is what we do. So I don't know. But what I always say is, what that experience has taught me is that I will never be at a meeting and leave it, and people will not have heard a true recovery message, because if there's some meetings where people don't speak recovery, and I don't want anyone to have to be willing but not have access to the right information.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that was like God's plan for me.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I ask is because I've had opportunities with people and I know like we don't fight, right? We have to stay out of controversy. And and you sometimes can't believe how controversial it is to show up with a big book.
Mm-hmm.
They recovered. There's like an immediate pushback. And so, I'm just wondering what your experience is with that as well. Like,
so a couple things. So the Saturday meeting where you came and spoke a couple times,
yeah,
it had really, it's a big book meeting, and it's gotten more focused on recovery and the 12 steps. And at one point, I remember saying to a sponsor, like, I don't want to go to this meeting anymore, because like no one is talking about the steps of recovery. And she said, you keep going, because they're keeping you abstinent. Mm-hmm. And now the meetings, a more solid big book meeting. And I remember one of the women saying to me, it's because of you, because of it. So years. And I guess I feel like I'm not responsible for the results. I'm just responsible for showing up and doing my part. So even if my part was to just carry that message and no one ever got it, that's okay. They kept me abstinent so I wouldn't have to say my message to a blank wall. So, and now it's more big book. So we are at 8:30. So I'm going to ask Adina, can you just kind of talk about what the GroupMe is and how people could get on it?
Hi everybody, Adina, compulsive overeater and bulimic. We have an awesome GroupMe where people share anything from like, hey, I need a call, to I'm available for the next couple of minutes, like, and it's great for outreach. And if you text me at 914-329-5672, I could get you situated. Also, any announcements in relation to the Monday group